Prayer is answered the moment the inner state shifts from wanting to having, the moment you move from the consciousness of the one who seeks to the consciousness of the one who has found. And now I want to speak directly to those of you who are close, because I know you are close. I know it because you would not be here, listening, leaning in, if you were not. The one who is far from this truth does not hunger for it this way. The hunger itself is the sign of proximity. You do not intensely desire what is entirely foreign to you. You desire what is close to you, close to your nature, close to your state, close to your becoming. The desire itself is evidence of the existence of the thing desired, and it is evidence of your readiness to inhabit the state in which that desire is satisfied. But I want you to understand something about this closeness. When you are close, truly close to a transformation in consciousness, the old state will often become louder. This is not a sign that it is growing more powerful. It is the opposite. It is the old state's last voice. When a pattern is about to dissolve, when an assumption that has shaped your world for years is about to be permanently replaced by a new one, the evidence in the outer world may seem to briefly amplify in the wrong direction. The situation may look worse before the shift makes itself visible. The finances may seem more strained. The relationship may seem more strained. The body may seem more insistent in its symptoms. Do not be moved by this. Do not interpret it as failure. This is simply the outer world completing its correspondence to the state you are leaving. It is the old state expressing itself fully one last time before consciousness moves on and the world has no choice but to follow. Please keep going. You are so close. The bridge of incident, the sequence of events, encounters, circumstances, and opportunities that will carry your desire from the inner to the outer is already being constructed in ways you cannot see and do not need to see. You do not know how it will happen. You do not need to know. In fact, the need to know how is itself a subtle form of disbelief, a quiet insistence that you must manage and monitor the process, which implies that the process might fail without your management. Let it go. Your only work is the inner state. Your only responsibility is the assumption. The how is not your province. The how belongs to the infinite intelligence that moves all things into alignment when consciousness has settled into a new home. Think of sleep. Every night you surrender. You do not manage the world while you sleep. You do not supervise your heartbeat or negotiate with your immune system or oversee the maintenance of your cells. You simply let go into unconsciousness, and the whole of life tends to itself. The law of assumption asks for something similar, a surrender of the management, a release of the monitoring, a willingness to fall into the new state as naturally as you fall into sleep, trusting that the world will do what the world has always done, confirm whatever is most fundamentally assumed within. I want to address now the question of the former state, because this is where many stumble in a particularly poignant way. They have moved in imagination into the new state. They have felt the feeling of the wish fulfilled. They have inhabited, however briefly, the consciousness of the person they intend to be. And then they look down and they see the former self still standing there, the evidence of the old state still arranged around them, and they feel a kind of grief, a pity for the old self, a guilt sometimes, as though leaving the old state is a form of abandonment. But you must understand, the old self is not a person, it is a state, and states have no feelings that can be hurt. You do not owe loyalty to a state of lack. You do not honor suffering by agreeing to continue suffering. There is nothing noble in maintaining an assumption that diminishes you. The only genuine gift you can give to anyone in your life, to the people who love you, to the world at large, is to become the fullest, freest, most realized version of yourself. And that requires that you release the old man, that you stop paying him visits, that you stop telling his story as though it is still your story. Your story, your real story, is not what has happened to you. Your story is what you are assuming to be true about you right now, in this moment, in the privacy of your own mind. And that story can change. It can change in an instant, not gradually, not through a long rehabilitation of the self. In an instant, in the space of a single decision of consciousness to occupy a different state, everything that ever was can become simply the former things that shall not be remembered, nor come into mind, as Scripture says. The past is not a wall. It is not even a path. It is simply what was imagined before you imagined differently. Behold, I make all things new. Revelation 21:5. All things new. Not improved things, not things gradually repaired. New. That is the power of consciousness shifting its state. Nothing carries over that you do not carry. The new state comes with its own history, its own logic, its own set of confirming facts, and the world rushes to supply them, because the world has no other function than to supply what consciousness demands. Now, I want to speak about identity, because identity is the operant power here more than any technique, any visualization method, any affirmation practice. It is not what you say about yourself that determines your experience. It is what you are. And what you are is what you most fundamentally assume yourself to be in the quiet of your own being, below the level of deliberate thought, in the deep water of your basic self-concept. If, at that deep level, you assume yourself to be the kind of person to whom certain good things simply do not come, no surface affirmation will override it. If, at that deep level, you assume yourself to be someone who is perpetually almost there, but never quite arrived, the world will confirm it with exquisite faithfulness. Every affirmation, every vision board, every technique applied on top of a contrary self-concept is like painting beautiful colors on a wall that is structurally unsound. The structure must change. And the structure changes not through force, but through being, through choosing deliberately and repeatedly to be the one who already is, not to become, not to eventually achieve, to be now, in this body, in this ordinary day, in the middle of circumstances that may not yet reflect it. To speak from that identity, to think from that identity, to move through the world with the settled, unhurried confidence of one for whom the thing is already done because inwardly it is. The man who knows he is loved moves differently through a room than the man who hopes to be loved. The woman who knows she is abundant makes different choices, holds different conversations, meets different eyes than the woman who fears there will not be enough. The inner state is always leaking outward, always. In 1,000 imperceptible ways, the world reads your self-assumption and responds in kind. So the work, if we must call it work, though it is really the most natural thing, is to align the deep assumption with the desired state and then to hold it. Not to grasp it anxiously. To hold it the way you hold a sleeping child, with tenderness, with certainty, without squeezing, knowing that it is real and safe and yours. Let me tell you what I have seen. Not in others, though I have seen it in others, but in the pattern of this law as it operates without exception across every life it touches. I have seen people whose outer circumstances were utterly, comprehensively contrary to what they desired. I have seen poverty that seemed structural, illness that seemed permanent, relationships so broken they seemed irreparable. And I have seen in every one of these cases, without exception, that when the inner assumption genuinely shifted, when the consciousness of the person moved from the state of the problem to the state of the solution, the outer world rearranged, not always in the way expected, not always through the door anticipated, but it rearranged. The bridge of incident appeared, the circumstance shifted, the body responded, the relationship found its opening. Not because the world is magic in some frivolous sense, because the world is mind, because consciousness precedes experience always and in all things. Because you have never, not once in your life, experienced anything that did not begin as an assumption held within you. Not once. There are no exceptions to this law. There are only people who have not yet recognized it operating in their lives. I said you are close. I want to tell you why I know this with such certainty. Because the fact that these words are reaching you, the fact that something in you responds to them, not as new information, but as recognition, as memory, as the quiet sense of yes. I have always known, this tells me, that your consciousness is already at the threshold. The door is not distant. You are standing at it. Your hand is on the handle. The only thing left to do is to enter. And entering means nothing dramatic. It means settling into the state of the wish fulfilled with such completeness, such naturalness, such undefended ease, that you stop checking whether the door is opening and simply find yourself somehow already on the other side. It means taking your attention off the evidence of the former state truly, not as a discipline, but as a natural consequence of being so fully absorbed in the new state that the former one simply ceases to hold your interest. Think of a man who receives word that he has won something extraordinary, a fortune, a position, a love returned. In the first moments after receiving that news, does he monitor the outer world anxiously for confirmation? Does he check repeatedly to make sure it is still true? No, he simply knows. And from that knowing, a naturalness flows. He calls the people he loves. He makes the decisions the new reality calls for. He moves not strenuously, not performatively, but from the inside, from the settled certainty of one whose world has changed. That is the state. That is what you are choosing now. That is what, in choosing, you make real. Assumption hardens into fact. This is not metaphor. This is the mechanism of creation itself. The assumption you sustain the state you inhabit long enough and deeply enough to feel natural crystallizes into the physical world with the same inevitability that water crystallizes into ice when the temperature is right. You do not have to force the crystallization. You do not have to manage it or accelerate it or worry about whether it is happening at the correct rate. You simply have to keep the temperature right. You simply have to maintain the state. And the outer world, with its infinite creative intelligence, will form itself around you precisely as your assumption demands. Now, I want to offer you something very specific, a practice, if you will, though I prefer to call it simply a return to the truth of what you are. Tonight, before you sleep, I want you to close your eyes and find the scene that would imply the wish fulfilled. Not the wish itself, not the thing you want, the scene that would make sense only if the wish were already yours. The handshake, the phone call, the view from the window of the new home, the feeling of the body restored, the ordinary Tuesday afternoon of the life you intend. Find that scene, step into it, not as an observer watching it from outside, as the one living it from within, seeing what that version of you would see, feeling what that version of you would feel, breathing the air of that life as though it were the only air there is. And then, holding that feeling, allow yourself to drift towards sleep. Because in that threshold between waking and sleeping, that soft, impressionable state, the ancients called the hypnagogic, the subconscious mind receives what the conscious mind presents to it with unusual directness, unusual depth. The seed planted there in feeling roots immediately into the deep soil of the self and begins its invisible growth. Do this with faith, not the faith of one who is uncertain but hopes, the faith of one who understands the law, the faith of a farmer who has planted seeds in good soil in the right season, who does not dig them up each morning to check their progress, but who knows, with the calm certainty of experience and knowledge, that what is planted in good ground must grow.